Welcome to Baymore Stables Presents Know Your Horse. Now, this is a topic that completely infuriates me on any given day. It is something that I firmly and strongly feel every person who owns a horse must know. So, when somebody posts something along the line of, well, I think my horse is colicking, and somebody asks questions, like my first response is, okay, what's it doing? Oh, well, it's rolling, it's kicking its stomach. Okay, how much water has he had? How much hay? Is he eating? Is he drinking? Has he shit? Has he pissed? Those are questions that are automatic to me. And for some reason, they're not to people. And my session today is going to be know your horse and what you should and should not know. So we're going to start out with, you have a horse. So you want to know what their normal behavior is. How much water do they drink in a day? How much do they waste their hay? Do they get hay cubes? You want to know what's normal, because when you figure out what's normal with your horse, then you're easy to figure out abnormal. Abnormal then sticks out like a thorn on a rose. So the average horse's temperature is between 99 and 101. Now, you should really know what your horse's temperature is, because it is just a range. Some horses run hot, some horses run cold. But you should know what's good for your horse. You should always know what's your horse's water intake, because a horse that doesn't drink water can become dehydrated very fast. And since they are very scheduled animals, especially if they're out in the field 24/7, you will not see a horse walk up to the water bin 10 times a day. They will go up in their own scheduled time to drink water. So you want to know how much they're drinking. Trimming feet. You should know how often your horse needs to be trimmed, not when he gets trimmed, needs to be trimmed. Like, I've heard some people say, well, my horse needs to get her feet trimmed every 4 weeks. Not every horse does. And you need to know how your horse's foot is growing. I do not understand how a lot of people will say, oh, well, the farrier was here and my horse is lame. Your horse shouldn't be lame after a trim. It just shouldn't be that way unless they've hit the quick, they've taken off too much toe, they've taken off too much heel. Your horse's feet should be trimmed to the conformation of the horse. And your blacksmith should be advising you of that. Now, it's good to have a rotation for trimming, but not every horse will fit in that rotation. We have one here. Well, Hannah's had her feet done once in 18 years, and there's not a soul that'll touch her. She doesn't grow a toe. She doesn't grow a heel. She doesn't need to. She wears them down honestly. Whereas my 3-year-old, she needs hers done every 5-6 weeks. And because she grows a toe and starts getting some wings on there, and the frog gets a little overgrown. So you should be talking to your blacksmith about, okay, you're trimming my horse. Where does he grow more of a heel? Does he grow more of a toe? Is he offside? Is he level? Is he, these are questions that your blacksmith, whether it be for the barn or just yourself, they're happy to answer. Blacksmiths are fantastic people. To me, they're the ones that just, sometimes I shake my head on how much disrespect is given to farriers. And it amazes me that you expect them to come in and do a job, but yet you're not willing to give them the proper canvas to do their job with. If your blacksmith's coming, bring your horse in from the field. If he's going to be a prick, say, hey, this horse is a prick. There's so many different things you can do to help your blacksmith. Because you don't want your blacksmith to get hurt. And better yet, you want him to come back. And people need to learn on what's good and what's bad. So we're going back to knowing your horse and knowing what's good and what's normal for your horse. Even in boarding stables, if people want to board horses, it's absolutely irrelevant to me. I do not board horses, nor will I ever board horses. That's my choice. So when a boarding stable comes out with a long rant about, what they all do for what's paid on the horse, my response is, that's your choice. You chose to take on somebody else's horse. You chose to do this. Trust me, they're making money. I know they're going to tell you they're not making anything. Yeah, they are. because you wouldn't do it. Logically speaking, you're not going to do it if you're not making any money. So of course you're making money, and that's the name of the game. But in the same sense, most boarding stables will have rotations. They'll have the, teeth getting done once a year, the vet's coming, vaccinations. You're only required to, in Canada, you're only required to have the rabies vaccination. Some people do tetanus too, which is, to me, the rest of the vaccinations, I question, but that's my prerogative. And when it comes to like trimming feet, and when it comes to feeding and what they're feeding, as a horse owner, even though you are boarding, that boarding stable is providing you a service. So you have the right to ask that barn manager questions such as, how much water does my horse drink? How much hay is he getting? What kind of hay is he getting? Is he getting grain? What kind of grain? These are questions that need to be asked as a horse owner to a barn manager. And efficient professional barn manager will answer those questions happily. I do not condone any boarding stable that has a entitled attitude. It makes no sense to me at all. If you're going to take on somebody else's horses in your barn, then you need to provide the service you're getting paid for. There is no red line about it. If you're taking money for a service, you need to provide the service. If the person that's enjoying that service has questions about your service, you need to answer them. That's it. That's bottom line. So anybody who wants to come back and say, oh, well, this is I don't really care. If you can't sit and explain yourself and your program to the person paying you very good money, and in the last 10 years, board has literally jumped. I'm amazed on what the board is for horses, which is the cost of living, and that's fine. But you have to remember, as a horse owner, you have as many rights as that barn owner. And if you can't have a meeting of the minds, then you need to find a new barn. And because it's your responsibility to know about your horse. You don't get to shake yourself off and say, well, I board him out. That's what I pay her to do. You're right, you do. But if you don't want to know your horse, why own it? So that's just my little rant on boarding stables. But neither here nor there. I'm not a boarding stable, nor will I ever be. So that brings us to, okay, you have your horse. You know his water intake, grain. This baffles me to no end. If you have an easy keeper, say you're going out riding 2-3 times a week, but pretty much 80%, 70% of the time the horse is sitting, it doesn't need a performance feed. It doesn't even need sweet feed. A lot of the horses out there right now are overweight. And if your horse cannot justify the grain he's getting, don't give it to him. You can feed a horse on just mixed grain. You don't need the big $35 bag of feed. It's not necessary for the horse. You got to know what your horse needs in the ways of nutritional balances. So if your horse is big and fat, look up to whether they're overweight. I firmly believe probably 80% of the riding horses out there are overweight. And people think that's normal and that they should be. No, it's not. It's actually hurting your horse with carrying that extra weight because they have no energy. It's putting pressure on their legs, tendons, heart. It's the same as a person, an overweight person. I am a fluffy person. And I struggle. Imagine what your horse is doing, carrying your fat ass around too. But that's something you're going to discuss. People are going to disagree with. I don't really care. I feed what I feed, and I have zero issue with my horses per se. Everyone I've ever looked for in my career. We feed them what they need, not what we want. And you feed them in comparison to their level of performance. If they're sitting in the field 80% of the time, grain is not what they need. Good quality hay, lots of water, maybe a thing of mixed oats. That's about it. So you have to consider the normal in your horse. Once you figured this out, the rest of this is so easy. is you got to figure out your normal. So I have a mare out here, and well, she is amazing. 3-year-old. Of course, Bonanza line bred filly. We call her Decca. And she is bright red. I always told myself I'll never have a chestnut horse. Oh, now I got 3 of them. It's like, what the hell, eh? But Decca is so smart. She's really had nothing done with her. You can open the trailer door, she'll pop right up onto it. She stands for the black and it's good as gold. But she goes in phases where if she's hitting a growth spurt or starting to fill out, where she'll look like she's losing a little bit of weight. She's not, but I always increase her grain. It's usually spring and fall with her. But she's very, not timid. She's just so smart. We love Decca. So we take measurements every month in our barn. Once a month we go out, we take weight measurements. And I have a spreadsheet going to which I can look at what the weight was last month on the horse to what they are this month. And it helps me because nobody can eyeball the correct physical attribute of a horse. Nobody can say, okay, that horse, sometimes it's obviously obese, sometimes it's obviously skinny. I get that. But on the norm, pick up a tape. Cost you $7. And know if they're fluctuating. Know, that's what we do to keep, that's how I keep on top of my barn. Is we do measurements once a month. We measure, on the babies, we measure them, their height until they're 2. And then we measure everybody's weight once a month. So that I know, because I have a breeding stallion. Everybody knows breeding stallions go down in weight during breeding season. They come back in the fall, but you want to maintain them. And I have a couple of high strung. I got a couple standardbreds, which sometimes they're good, sometimes they're hard to keep weight on. My quarter horses, of course, Ruby, get fat on air, so will Willow. But I know it's normal for them. So I keep it to where I know it's normal. And Gregor is phenomenal at making sure. He sometimes misses something. Not that he misses it. It's more he doesn't have the experience I have. But he's pretty quick to say, something's not right. Can you take a look? And I do. So we know the normal in our barn. So when the abnormal pops up, it's like, there is no question. So then it comes down to first aid. There are several groups out there giving first aid courses to horse people. I think that is spectacular. Any sort of knowledge regarding horses is a benefit. Not the way I do it, I'm more old school, but to take a course in first aid for horses is just going to give you knowledge, and I'm all for that. I think it's great. Me, myself, sometimes I've been affected by so many injuries over the years. When you're racing horses and you see one going to the quarter pole and he's down in a heap, you're kind of going, you're running across track wondering, do I got a dead horse? Do I got a live horse? And there's usually blood. It's kind of like a standardbred or thoroughbred person. They're trained to think on their feet, literally seconds. There is no thought process, which I understand not every people have. But in my first aid kit that I got at home here is I have 4 rolls of vet wrap. I have a tube of polysporin, 2 rolls of black tape, a bottle of saline solution, a bag of maxi pads, a bag of pad liners, 3 diapers, bottle of peroxide, bottle of alcohol, 30cc syringe and a 60cc syringe, and a thermometer. But I'm going to tell you a little trick about a thermometer, because we've all had it happen, is if you're going to get a little digital thermometer, take my advice. On the end of it, take the black tape, get a little 6-inch piece of string and a clothespin, and tape it so that you can snap that clothespin to the tail, because once that sucker gets up there, it ain't coming out. Oldest trick in the book. Just tape it with string and a clothespin, top of the tail. You don't lose the thermometer. But that's my first aid kit. And I know people are kind of going, well, why? The maxi pads and liners are all individually wrapped. So they're sterile. And they are absorbent. So if you have, by chance, say you're out on the trail and you're horse jumps on his back foot or has a cut. You can take the vet wrap and a maxi pad, wrap it around, a little bit of polysporin on it to get home so where you can look at it and decide at that point if it needs a vet or not. Anything, whether it be a cut in the legs, feet, the back, you want to flush it. Saline solution is a non-bacterial water, so it's great for flushing. You want to make sure that if there's a cut, there's no bacteria getting in there. There's no particulates in there. And that's what the peroxide and the saline water, the solution does. It just allows you to flush a cut, because if it's bleeding, that's good. You don't want an arterial flow or anything, but when a horse cuts himself, you want to see the blood. Because if there's blood, there's going to be no swelling. And with no swelling means that it's going to heal. You can usually just flush it out and, not wrap it or anything, just kind of flush it out and keep it flush with peroxide. But if you don't see blood, you're looking at a possibility of a pus pocket or an abscess, which is going to have to be cut, but it's going to make a mess. So first and foremost, the 3 things I would want anybody to think about if your horse is hurt. 1, is there blood? 2, can they walk? 3, are you seeing something that you shouldn't be seeing? Now, like I said, with blood, you want to see, like we've had so much, we had an old mare years ago. She's now deceased. She was awesome. She got trailered over and comes in, back foot's just cut. She just kind of moved her foot and accidentally cut it on the trailer. Nobody's fault. So I come up and it was like, well, crap. And I handed Greg a maxi pad. I said, throw some polysporin on it, flush it with peroxide, wrap it for the night, you're fine. And he's like, that works. And then we had, as everybody knows, we had Valor, who is, including his owner will tell you, a little shit. He came in at about 3.5 months old with a 6-inch stick sticking out of his neck. It's like, where did he get that from? So Greg pulled it out and he says, what now? I said, flush it out. And it was all flushed out. He wanted to make sure there was no slivers or anything left in there. And he says, what now? I said, nope, just flush it for the next couple days until it scabs over, then it'll start healing. I go, if there's any infection, it'll come out somewheres. And about 2.5 months later, he blew a pus pocket. It's like, okay, Greg, there's where the infection is. And that's okay. And that brings me to pus pockets, blowing an abscess. Every horse at one point in their life will probably come in from the field and you would think his leg was broke. And you're going, oh my God. I would say 70% of the time they're about to blow a pus pocket. But that's good. So, because we have something called animal Intex. And it is a little medicated kind of poultice where if you think your horse is blowing an abscess or the farrier said, hey, he's got a soft spot here, is you put this animal Intex, you cut off a little strip. It comes in a fairly big strip. And it's plastic on one side, and then it feels like cotton, but it's not cotton, and then plastic on the other side. And what you do is you drop it into hot water, you wrap it around the coronet band, and then put vet wrap. And as that animal Intex dries, it is pulling that abscess. It's pulling the pus out from the top of the foot. You don't want an abscess to blow out the bottom, because then you run the risk of having it affect the hoof wall. It could damage the frog, the heel. You want to pull it out through the top. Animal Intex is wonderful shit. If you have an abscess, wrap it. Usually within 3 days, your pus pocket's out. But for those 2-3 days, your horse acts like its leg is broke. It's not. So you just kind of carry on that way. But Animal Intex should be in your tack box. It comes in a package. It stays forever. It doesn't really become effective until you wet it and wrap it. But you always wrap around the coronet band. You want to pull it out from the top. And then you'll find as soon as that pus pocket relieves itself, your horse is sound as a dollar. But then you can, for the hole that it came out of at the top, you can throw some iodine or throw some peroxide in it to make sure there's no infection and get into the coffin joint and or the hoof wall. So that brings me to more lameness. Now, it's you kind of sit here and go, there's so many things a horse could be lame on. It could be splints, it could be a drop suspensory, it could be a pulled stifle, could be. You could go on and on. And unless you're faced with that one thing, it's like, what the hell? And that's fine. There's several good books out there about lameness in horses that are absolutely fantastic. I even have a couple. But what I do want you to understand is the preventative measure. Now, soft tissue damage is quite common. And people kind of wonder, well, it's stress. No, it's not. In some cases, with people that are using polos and those SMB boots or skid boots, boots of any sort surrounding the leg does weaken the tendons. So, and the worst part is constant use, or if they're left on too long, because they're not meant to be left on too long, it can weaken the horse's tendons. Now, if there is a conformation issue and or a surface issue or environmental issue, along with the weakening of the tendons, you could blow a bow, drop a suspensory, and then you're kind of going, what the hell? If the horse doesn't need it, don't put it on. Now, I see a lot of people using polos to lunge horses, which I don't get, but hey, to each his own. But I don't suggest you using polos, because whether it be the SMB boots, polos, stable bandages, wraps, tensor bandages, if you put them too tight or they get twisted, or better yet, they get wet, you're putting direct pressure on the tendon. And you can do what somebody would say, we call corded. And corded is the pressure and circulation being cut off due to a twisted bandage, being pulled too tight, not having it on properly, putting black tape on too tight. And it looks something like a bow, and they come back from it. But you have to realize it is something that is done to them, whether it be through wraps, bandages, tape, anything along that line. It does weaken the tendons. And if not put on properly, it can actually cause your horse to do what they call cord. And that's a point of the tendon that's had the circulation cut off and therefore has a little bump. It looks a bit like a bow, but not as bad as a bow. So if you don't, I'm a big one for bell boots. I would put bell boots on everything. Only because a horse can jump on its quarter walking in from the barn. It's ridiculous. But they don't hurt anything. You could leave them on for days. I had a mare, I had a gelding years ago. And it was like, we wanted to put the bell boots on him, but he's kind of a prick. Trust me, this horse wore equipment. But I kind of I said to my boss, well, what the hell? And we didn't have the little Velcro ones back then. We had to literally flip them outside and pull them over the foot. And he goes, well, get him on. It's like, okay, So we went and got the bell boots on him because he was constantly stepping on his quarter, warming up and stuff. And I'd been taping it, but he said that wasn't good enough. So we had to put bell boots on him. Well, I put the bell boots on, made sure they were the right size. Now he had a fairly big foot. And I looked at the boss and I said, how are we going to get them off? He says, fuck them. They can stay on. He said, just flip them up the bath underneath. That horse wore those bell boots for 2 weeks. Didn't hurt him. He got a little bit of heel rash, but I took care of that with some Furicin. But it was not anything that was ever going to hurt him. And it was protective. So when you're doing up your horse to go for a ride, for what show, anything, remember that everything you use should be functional, not pretty. So if you're going to use the SMB boots, and I don't know a ton about them, I'm still learning. I'm like the way they fit. I like it. But do they get heavier? And everybody says, what do you mean wet? When polos get wet, they become heavy and drag down. They retain water. And that includes if you're in a sand ring or anything like that. You'll never keep a polo in place. But I do see with the SMB boots that they fit nicely. But you want to make sure that you're putting them on where they fit nicely, and you're going to use them. Of course, barrel horses are going to need some form of protection. Hunter jumpers usually wear skid boots and bell boots. But you got to realize anything you use is also going to affect how your horse goes. So if you're putting bell boots on, 90% of the time, your horse is going to pick his front feet up higher and get them out of the way. Not a problem. But if you're using, say, polos and they're getting heavy, it's going to adversely change how your horse moves, because your horse will always compensate to what is easier. So if you're putting the SMB boots on, which it's fine, is got to realize he's going to move differently. And everything you do, whether it be skid boots, they're going to move differently. Put shoes on, they're going to move differently. And you have to understand that anything you do is going to allow the horse to move differently. And you have to be ready for that. So if you're going to do something and changes, and I mean, it's your judgment call. If you think your horse needs skid boots, SMB boots, polos, blah, blah, that's your call. But just realize that what you might think they need might be not what they need. And it goes back to knowing your horse. So if your horse is stressing and, is coming up lame quite often, then you got to start doing a checklist. It's like, if he's lame after the farrier, you got to go to the farrier and say, hey, why is this horse lame? And just say, he shouldn't be. And then you look at him. For some reason, they like to take the toes off, and I'm not real sure why. But you want to have everything for the horse, not for your prettiness. You want everything on your horse to be functional and explained. And we're not going to go into bits in that because that just baffles me to no end. But when it comes to boots and bandages, make sure your horses do. But better yet, make sure you are doing them right. And I know people are going to say, well, of course I am. You'd be amazed on the people I've seen at shows wearing polos that are too tight, that are top heavy, and that are wet. Horses sweat. That's getting wet. You're putting more pressure on those tendons. Take them off. So that covers the lameness. And I mean, you could go on and on about how a horse can come up lame. There's just too many scenarios to think about. But you can do preventative. And like I said, know what normal is. If your horse gets wind puffs and if he's in the stall overnight, throw some alcohol on it. Alcohol is, believe it or not, the lightest blister out there. If your horse has pulled a stifle, rub it with alcohol until your hands are warm. And you can actually you can scurf it up pretty good. And when you're trying to stuff with stifles especially, you want a bit of scurf there. Alcohol can do that. There's, you don't have to go out and buy big liniments. Sometimes a handful of alcohol and away you go. But I would suggest either go to the local bookstore, Lameness on Horses. But know your horse. Know what's normal for your horse. I cannot stress that enough. Nobody can know your horse better than you. So then we get to the big, oh my God, colic. Well, colic can be completely detrimental to horses. You can have an impaction, you can have a twist, you can have, death. It's so many. But you have to realize, when colic starts, it is just a tummy ache. And if you know the normal for your horse, you're going to know it's abnormal. And by time the horse is rolling and kicking out his belly, it's been 2 to 4 hours, which means there's very high likely there's a twist and there's an impaction. But let's rewind. I do have a home remedy for my colic. We call them tummy aches. And disagree, not agree, my vet approves. Every vet I've spoken to about it approves of it. Does it negate a vet? Absolutely not. You will never hear me say, don't call a vet. What I am trying to teach is for someone to have the knowledge to know when to call the vet. So it comes to colic, it usually starts out with a tummy ache. Now, not every case is different. Every horse, every case is different. But you can do a remedy. And my remedy is basically 20 cc's gripe water, 20 cc's of Pepto-Bismol, 40 cc's of mineral oil, and then warm water. Mix it in a pop bottle. You just syringe it into them, take them for a walk. You want to get those guts moving. You want to get it soothed. You want to get the mineral oil is going to, if there's an impaction, it's going to get them to shit. The gripe water is going to ease the tummy stress, as is the warm water. The Pepto, again, is going to ease the tummy a little bit, hopefully getting them to shit or piss. So you can give the remedy, and if it doesn't work, you maybe wait a half hour, give it again, but watch your horse, watch the temperature, watch the signs. Now, there's cases where a horse is colicked and it had a previous colic. It happens once, it'll happen twice. Yeah, and you like, okay, we called the vet. It's like, and what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to check for movement on the stomach. I have a stethoscope. I do it myself. They're going to check for any movement or sounds in the stomach. They're going to look at the horse. They're going to do a CRT, which is a capillary refill time, which is where you push the gum, check the color of the gums, push the gum to see how long it takes to come back. They're going to do a dehydration test, which you pinch a little piece of skin on the neck, let it go to see how quick it goes back. They're going to take a heart rate to see how much stress the horse is under. And then once they've all done that, they're going to get a pail of warm water and a bottle of mineral oil. They're going to give them probably some butyrbandamine to relax them. And they're going to tube in probably half a gallon of water and mineral oil to push it through. But this, and that's my point. If it's an impaction or a twist, they can see that with a rectal. Not a problem. We're not going into that. We're talking about preventative measures to what you can do before you call the vet. And colic is a tummy ache. And I know people are going to disagree. Of course it can get worse. Anything can get worse. But it starts out with a tummy ache. And it usually is when your horse comes in. Like I said, know what normal is. If your horse comes in and usually goes right to his grain, eats his hay, half pail of water, and then you come out in the morning and the water hasn't been touched, the grain's not finished. Okay, boom, we have something wrong. You don't have to go further. You know something's wrong. And that's when you pull the horse out, you take a temperature. You sit there, you go over him with fine-tooth comb, make sure there's no blood. Take a temperature, figure out what his temp's at. And then you go to the stall. And this is the most critical thing you can do with a horse that's sick. You go in, you see how much hay he has left, if any. You see how much water, make a mental note of how much water they drank. And then you're going to clean their stall. You're going to count how many shit piles are in that stall. You're going to count the wet spot and how big the wet spot is. And this is something you should know. Because most horses with colic have either starts out with constipation or being tied up. And being tied up is where the muscles contract in a horse, preventing them from peeing. Once a horse ties up once, they will tie up again. It is brutal. But you're going to look for these because a horse is going to give you every answer if you ask the right question. Going through a horse's stall should tell you all your answers. And then you go out, take him for a walk, give him a treatment, take him for a walk, bring him back. You're looking for him to piss or shit because that's important. Now we have Hannah. Everybody knows I talk about Hannah, crazy Hannah. And once we got down here, Mare is like literally maintenance free. It would amaze you. We've spent nothing on her since we got her, and she's batshit crazy. But she colicked. I looked out the field. I said, Gregor, I said, Hannah don't look right. And I'm a behind the scenes type of person. So Gregor says, no, she's fine. She ate her grain. She drank her water. She's not a big water drinker. So for her to drink a quarter pail of water is normal for her. And our horses drink between 3 to 5 flatback pails per day. And your horse should be drinking that. But so we went out at night. Greg had to go to work. And we went out at night. And I said, something's not right. My gut's telling me something's not right. She came in from the field. She wasn't her usual pinning her ears and being a jerk. She would just she was actually docile. And I like that side of her. It's gone now, but I like that side of her. So I said, no, this isn't right. So we got out our remedy. We don't mix it. You cannot pre-mix the remedy. It's got to be mixed up per use. You can't pre-mix it. So we gave her the remedy. And with Hannah, she's herd bound. So we just walk her 100 feet away from the barn and we let her run back to the barn. Okay. So we go back to the barn and nope, she's not touching her grain. She's not touching her hay. She's a huge hay eater. Like she'll eat a whole bale of hay. Not a big grain thing, but she doesn't get a lot. So after about the third remedy, it's about 9 o'clock at night, I said, Greg, call it. He says, okay. We called the vet out. And she was in foal at the time. So the vet came out and he heard a few gut sounds, not enough to be, he confirmed it wasn't a twist. It wasn't an impaction. It was just basically colic. So he did exactly what I said he would do. He gave her some Banamine. We put a tube down, mineral, I think he put half a jug of mineral oil in her, warm water. And then I'd say about 2 hours later, she actually had a big shit. And she started to munch at her hay. Well, remember, she's in foal here. So, and Greg asked, he goes, she's in foal. And the vet said, no, she should be fine. I looked at Greg. Greg came up. And he said, no, she should. I said, she's going to abort. He goes, no, the vet said, I don't care what the vet said. She's going to abort. So, went down. We did every 2-hour checks with her that night. And they had actually stitched the tube to her so that she couldn't get it out, just in case we had to put some more mineral oil down. He left 2 jugs of mineral oil with us. And by about 2 a.m, she had taken a huge piss and about 3 more shits. She was just a munching at hay. So we left the tube in her till morning, went out, we took the tube out. The vet popped out just because he was in the area. I love our vets down here. And he's like, no. And he goes, no, she should. And I said to him, it's like, I don't deal with the vets very often. I said, so she should, if she's going to abort, she's going to do it within 3 days. He goes, well, I don't see why she would. He goes, but yeah, she's going to do it within 3 days. 2 days later, Greg walked out. She aborted. I knew she would. Just based on my experience. Nobody did anything wrong. It's not one of those scenarios. So she had colic, and any sort of stress can abort. You say carry on and go to the next one. But she's healthy now, and she just kind of bops around. But that was a case of knowing what's normal to what's abnormal. Even the craziest ones have normal. And as soon as she didn't go to her hay, I knew something was off. But, it's fixed. She's good. She's still batshit crazy. So you have to train yourself. When somebody asks a question online and all I hear is, I don't know her, call the vet. No, this is a time where you need to take your head out of your ass and you need to learn. You need to know what's normal and you need to know what you have to do. You don't want to be a hindrance to a vet. You want to be an asset. Because the vet's going to have questions. They're going to say, have you taken the temperature? Have they pissed? Have they shit? These are questions the vet's going to ask you. And when you look at them and say, I don't know, that is beyond ridiculous. Because these are things you should know. If you own a horse, these are answers you need to know. This is required. And even goes for the barn manager. If nothing should be done to anybody's horse without their knowledge. You don't get to make the judgment call. That's where standardbreds and riding horses are extremely different. Because when it comes to some barn, and this is just in my opinion, I'm not saying there are some great barn managers and great trainers out there, but there's also some asses too. And I know if you have a public barn, whether it be training or boarding, your boarder or client has the right to ask you questions. You don't have the right to say, I don't know. Because you're providing a service. I am amazed at the way some trainers and boarders talk to their clients. And I've had a couple of issues, and it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. I'm paying you for a service. You're going to listen to what I have to say. If I'm wrong, you can correct me and we can discuss it. But you don't get to uniformly tell me what to do. It doesn't work that way. In standardbreds, if you're running a public stable, if the trainer and or barn owner spoke to their clients the way some riding horse people do, you wouldn't have the horse the next day. It'd be like, yeah, I don't need that. There's 5 trainers waiting behind me. That'll take the 5% too. Not a big deal. But you have to educate yourself, whether it be in a book, whether it be online, whether you go to clinics. I think the clinics are putting on are awesome, but you need to know what's normal in your horse. If you're going to own your horse, you need to know what's normal, because when you go online and say, well, my horse is lame, and why you go to Facebook is beyond me. It's like, talk to somebody who's knowledgeable. You can call your vet's office and have the vet just talk to you on the phone. You can call somebody who has more experience, but better yet, you need to get off your ass and learn. You need to say, okay, my horse might be colicking. I can't find anything. And if your horse is out 24/7, trust me, they are very scheduled animals. No matter if you have 1 or 100, they're all going to be shitting in the same place. You can watch them for a half hour and know if they're going to. And it's something that infuriates me to no end, because never should you, when you hand an I don't know to anybody, it better be for a vague question. Instead of, because these are the same people that are saying, I don't know, but they're turning around going, well, you need to do this and you need to call the vet and no, you need to shut up. Don't go to Facebook for advice. Go to your friends list. There are so many knowledgeable people on Facebook where you can private message and say, hey, here's a little video. Can you tell me what you think? And they're going to answer you with respect. It's not going to be a hammering session. They're going to answer you with respect and say, okay, what I would suggest, but not pictures. Pictures don't do shit. If you're going to ask for an opinion, you take these phones, these cell phones that you guys are on, take videos. You take a video to what your horse is doing. Nobody can properly assess a horse off a picture. Nobody can. And if somebody is, they're stupid. You need to take minimally a 1 to 2 minute video and send it off, or watch it yourself and say, okay, I think I get this. And you'll be fine. But you cannot say, I don't know. There's answers out there. The horse will give them to you. Ask the right questions. And that's my series on Know Your Horse for today. Otherwise known as take your head out of your ass and get with the program. If you're going to own a horse, know your horse. If you're not going to know your horse, buy a goldfish. That's all I have to say on that. And I hope it pisses people off, because people want to prove me wrong. And the more they want to prove me wrong means they're educating themselves. So I hope everybody's pissed off. And that's the way I feel about it. But everybody has their own opinion. Everybody has their own judgment. Gregor has asked me if anybody would like to hear my very vocal opinion on any certain topic or questions, or even on something I've said in a podcast. If you want to send us an email or send us a Facebook message, and it will be anonymous. I'm not playing this game shit. It's always about the horses with me, and that's what this podcast is about, is educating about horses. So if you have anything you want to input, I will be happy to address that. So you can either email us at baymorestables@gmail.com or Facebook. Everybody know I'm Kathy B on Facebook. And let me know if you have issues, or even if I said something to piss you off. Great. I want to hear about it. Open a discussion. So that's it for this week. Stay tuned for next week's broadcast. Have a good day.